Good day, everyone. Welcome to Is Your Way in Your Way podcast. And I am your host, Cassandra Crawley Mayo. And for my new listeners out there, just so you'll know, this podcast is all about individuals who are ready. I mean, really, really ready to move forward in their lives, overcome obstacles, mitigate those self-imposed barriers like procrastination, self sabotage, all those barriers, and even some external barriers that's preventing you from moving forward in your life and preventing you from living your best life on your terms. And we talk about topics related to business and personal development and even self improvement. And today, our topic is going to be about the value of prioritizing well-being. And who do I have today to help to the expert to talk about that is her name is Terre Short. And let me introduce Terre to the stage. Well, hello, Terre.
Hey, happy to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad that you're here. For my listeners, I'm going to read Terry's bio so you'll get to know a little bit about her before we take a deep dive into our discussion today. Terre Short, MBA, is an accomplished author, speaker, coach, and the visionary behind Thriving Leader Collaborative. With a focus on authentic leadership, Terre blends her extensive experience as a senior executive in the healthcare and hospitality sectors with her expertise as a neuromindfulness practitioner. For over a decade, she's guided Fortune 500 leaders in exploring intuitive pathways to success. Terre is also the author of The Words We Choose, your guide to how and why words matter. Her transformative insight stems from 30 plus years of leadership, including pioneering patient-centered care at, at HCA, which is a Healthcare Corporation of America, and her educational achievements include an MBA in healthcare management and a professional coach certification. Welcome to Is Your Way in Your Way, Terre. I have, my first question to you before I dive in, because I want my listeners to understand, what is a neuromindfulness practitioner?
Excellent question. So I did a neuromindfulness certification that I think everybody should do because
Okay.
it really helped me understand that it's out of Paris, actually, so that time change can be a challenge. But it's really helping us understand the neuroscience behind some of our behaviors. And if I'm going to coach people, I want to know that. I want to understand, well, Cassandra, I want to understand my own neuroscience first, right?
Yeah.
And what's driving my decisions and my choices for what I'm going to do, whether I'm going to procrastinate even. There's
Right.
neuroscience behind everything that we do and all of our behaviors. So I took that certification in order to more fully understand for
Yeah.
myself and for those that I coach.
Wow, that's fascinating, because now you make me want to take it so I can figure out why I do the things that I do. And also for my audience, some of them are procrastinators and have these self-imposed barriers that too could have enabled them to understand the dynamics of their behavior. Well, thanks for that clarification. Terre, I'm curious. And growing up, what were your aspirations and your goals? What were they in growing up?
All right, well, I'm going to date myself a little bit here, Cassandra, but I grew up in Maryland. I understand you're in Maryland as well.
Yeah.
When I was in junior high, I wanted to be the first woman at the Naval Academy.
Oh,
But I
awesome.
understand you recently had a guest, I believe, that was at
Yes.
the Naval Academy. And anyway, by the time I got to high school, that happened. So I was like, oh, okay. So that was an aspiration initially. And then I wanted to be an engineer. So that kind of played into, and because of the business that my father had and that I thought I would be taking over. And so suffice it to say that I was in a man's world. And
Yeah.
eventually, as I grew and as I started to learn things, what I really wanted was to have a seat at the table and to have a voice that made a difference in
Wow.
whatever path that I took, because at an early age, that's what I was learning, is that like a woman being at the Naval Academy, seat at the table. My
Wow.
being the first woman at the board table with 4 seasons in the group that I was in, having a seat at the table.
Wow, that's fascinating to be the first at the table. Well, I can recall myself being first, like the first African American female in a
Mhm.
lot of my positions. So I
Mhm.
I applaud you for that. That's quite a task. Now, by being that, now what propelled you to begin working in the leadership realm? Like,
Mhm.
where did that come from?
Well, actually, I very rarely tell this story, but one of my first jobs was as the cotton candy girl at the pool or country club we belonged to. And the next year I was the manager of the facility of the snack bar, right?
Oh,
And
okay.
I was 17. So,
Wow, you
but
excelled.
yeah, it was by default. The previous manager
Mhm.
didn't show back up, and I was apparently a very good candy cotton maker.
Yeah, obviously.
And next thing I know, I was the leader. And I started to learn that I had this innate ability to lead others. But more importantly, as the time went by, what I appreciate the most about my skills at this point is my ability to coach others. And by that, I mean, help unravel, like peel back the layers of what this person is and what's important to them, and
Mhm.
help them live and realize and fulfill their highest potential. And
Wow.
so that's what's important to me.
So you were able to do that. Did you do that before? Was it, like you said, it's an innate before you got any education on it, or that was just a natural for you? And
Yeah,
was that a natural because of working with your dad? Was being the Navy Academy? What or what? How did that come about?
yeah, excellent question. I feel very strongly that it was working with my dad and my relationship with my dad, who, I mean, I was 6, 7, 8 years old when I started hearing, you can do anything. You can
Wow.
do anything. And he meant that. And he still means that, you know. So I had an advantage, and that is a clear advantage that I had. I
Mhm.
know others that kind of took longer to find who they are and what their contribution will be in this world. And I believe that support from my father, but particularly a father, because it was a man saying to
Yes.
me,
Yeah.
you can do anything. And yeah, that's what propelled me. And so then along I go, and I'm go beyond being a leader in that I want to coach others and I want to uplift others, other
Mhm.
women in particular. And I eventually get to, when you mentioned HCA, I eventually get to HCA, and the first week that I started my role, I was invited to go meet with the CEO of the whole company. And
Yes.
my boss, who was the chief experience officer, she was telling me like what a privilege it was that I was going to do this in my first
Yeah.
week. And I said, well, I tell you what, I have some coaching for him.
Oh,
And
no.
she said, oh no, you can't do that on the very first meeting. And I said, well, she said, I think you came out of the womb ready to coach people.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I just want him to be his best self. And I've heard him say some things, and the words he's choosing aren't, I
Mhm.
believe, exactly what he means. He has a very large heart, and he could express that differently. So anyway, my point is, I've felt the draw towards, or the pull towards, helping others be
Yeah.
their
Well,
best self.
kudos to you.
Yeah.
In my book titled Is Your Way in Your Way, I talk about how your childhood is significant. It plays a role like never before into your adulthood. And so I just want my listeners to see what propelled you, why you are like you are because of your childhood. And as you indicated, there's some people may not have had a childhood like that, but that's still okay because you can overcome it. So
Mhm.
that is just a true testament on what your childhood has done for you
Mhm.
in your latter years.
Mhm.
Now you talk about your book. I want to talk about that book. What was the why for writing that book? The words we choose, your guide to how and why words matter. Why did you write that book?
Yeah, so it was a combination or a culmination. It was a culmination over years. So when I was in hospitality, I listened to how the staff spoke to the guests who were paying at Four Seasons a large amount of money.
Yeah,
Like at the time, they were paying per night what the employee was probably paying per month for rent, right?
right,
And
exactly.
so the words that they chose and how that affected them. And then next thing you know, I'm in healthcare, and good golly, Cassandra, the things that I heard people say to patients, and I'd say, whoa, 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 hang on. Like, think about we're causing them more stress. We're heightening anxiety instead of lessening it by way of our word choices. And
Mm-hmm.
all along, I was listening to what leaders
Yes,
chose to say. And when they chose words that were limiting or minimizing of themselves or of the people they were speaking to. And that just sort of kept all going and going. And I said, whoa, 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 hang on. I want to write a book about this. It's not that there aren't books about communication,
yes,
but I want to write about that internal dialogue, the words you choose for yourself. And
yeah.
some of that is informed by childhood experiences and what others tell you, and then how that plays out in your adulthood.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Yeah, because words are powerful. I mean, the tongue could, I remember this saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words could never harm. And that is so untrue,
Sure.
but I used to say it all the time, but just that tongue can just get you in a lot of trouble. What are some of the words that were limits you said that can minimize a person? Like what are some of the words that can do that?
Should. If
Okay.
I tell you you should do something, I'm limiting your capacity to do it. I'm implying that it's because somebody else feels you should, or society feels you should, or what have you. And so
Right,
that's limiting. It's that you don't feel compelled to do that thing
right,
if I suggest it in that manner. But also limiting is whenever I say I can't, there's no reason to say that.
right.
Focus on what you can do, right?
Okay.
Not what you can't do.
Okay.
When I talk about when I use uncertain words like probably or maybe, and I think that
Mhm.
this probably will happen. I'm minimizing.
Mhm.
Just is like the grand minimizer. I
Yes.
in my book I talk about the dietitian who says to the patient, "Well, I'm just the dietitian and I'm here to do
Mm,
such and such." There's
mm,
no reason to say that. To say I'm the dietitian, and in that role, I play a role in your progression and your well-being and your ability to depart from the hospital
right.
when we get this nutrition straight, and so on and so forth. I'm not just anything.
Right. Like I'm just a mom or
Right.
stay at home mom or well, I can't do this. And listen to this, listeners. That's amazing. Like now I know I should not say to my husband, you should clean the car today, or you
Yeah.
should. Now I see how that word gets me in trouble. Well, let's talk about some words that are inspiring
Mhm.
and influencing as well.
Right. So easy up with can't, and you're going to just take off that apostrophe T and say that you can, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And then you're going to, so some of them you replace and some you abandon completely, like just cut that out.
Okay.
Cut it out
Okay.
completely, right? And then, but is a great minimizer too. It cuts anything that I might be talking about a project that I'm working on, but we have to look at this and such and such.
Right.
And so I'm minimizing it. And I would turn that around by saying, and we have an opportunity to further explore such and such.
Okay.
Now I'm uplifting that thought process. And probably one of my favorites is the difference between have to and get to. When I
Mhm.
say, Cassandra, that I have to do something, I'm implying burden. I'm implying a negative possibility, even within my own heart. And when I say that, um, that I get to do it or I will do it,
Yeah.
it turns it all around. From picking the kids up at school, I have to pick the kids up at school.
Right.
is implies burden, and they
Yeah,
hear that.
yes.
They
Yeah.
hear it, right? And then when I say I get to pick up the kids from school, and now someone whose kids are off doing their own thing, think about the privilege that is for a set amount of time to get to be in the car with them and
Right.
understand their world on a deeper level.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And not being a burden to the parent or
Yeah.
yeah. And the butt, like just get your butt out the way. It's kind of making me think those words that minimize and limit is you're in your way,
Yes.
by the words that you say. It's like, well, I'm just this. Well, I can't start this business, or I'm just so busy doing this. I don't know how I can. So that's interesting and very memorable for me to understand that those are words that are in your way. Now, Terry, now those just words and I can't, a lot of those are habits.
Mm-hmm.
You're conditioned to say it because that's what you say. So what can change that? I know it will probably take time, but any methodologies you've taught or coached that can help change that dynamic?
Well, first I say you can't unsee the list. So now we're offering the list to listeners, right? So they're hearing all these words. And so what the natural inclination is to say, first take an assessment. Which of those resonate? Which ones do I lean on more than
Mm-hmm.
others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then choose one to focus on. Don't try to fix them all. Don't go,
Okay.
I'm going to go but to N and can't to can. And,
Okay.
don't try to do that. And might and probably and this and that, you replace them with will. You assert that you will do something. So first do an assessment of what it is which words you gravitate towards. I know a lot of leaders that say, I think maybe this and that. And so they're going to cut that out. So choose one and then focus on that. And I have two tactics. One is your own self-reflection at the end of every day. What's the degree to which I use that word or caught myself before I used it? Because that's what happens first. You go, wait, and then you change and you decide not to say it. So self-reflection and applaud the fact that you caught yourself 3 times or what have you, and then ask another person. The second is like get some feedback from somebody. Like I might say to you, if we work together, I'd say, hey, Cassandra, I noticed that I insert but a lot when I'm speaking, and it's not my intention to cut it off. And I'd love for you to watch for that and give me some feedback at the end of the week.
Okay. Okay. That's good. That's good. So, like I had mentioned to you earlier, my listeners, I spoke to Terry before we came on, and I was sharing with her how long it took me to write a book. And it took forever. I hate to say this, but it's the truth. Probably 10 to 12 years to write this book. And I always used to say, as I think about it, I'm thinking about writing a book. I know I should write a book. I kept saying I should, but I couldn't. So I can see the things that paralyzed me, that had me stuck. It's just like you, for the listeners who want to have a business, want to change a job, or want to be promoted, or certain things to think about in your mind. What is it that you're saying that has you stuck and not moving forward? So that was brilliant, Terry, for you to share that information. Now, I want to know, how does changing one's perspective and owning your internal narrative hinge on word choices?
Well, you just led us there nicely talking about your book and
Uh-huh.
how you weren't saying I am going to write a book and I am capable of writing a book. You weren't, right? And so I call it your personal podcast. So
Okay.
just like we're on this podcast now, people have their earbuds in and they're listening. When they're not listening to your podcast, they're listening to their personal podcast, that internal narrative. Well, it
Yes.
ends up that you're the narrator, director, host, you're everything, right? The producer of that podcast. So it gets down to how you get out of your own way is
Yes.
that you start to choose words that are supportive and uplifting and ones that are going to propel you
Yeah.
towards where you really want to go, like the writing of a book. So
Right.
you switch it. You
Okay.
start, you write the story in your mind and you start saying over and over again, and particularly when the I can't comes in, you go, no, 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 I can and I will. And you start to change that narrative, which then changes your perspective. And it creates a momentum and an energy towards where you truly want to go.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Is there anything like, we have over 1,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of those are negative. And when you coach people, is there anything you share with them maybe to get their day started that they should do the first thing in the mornings? And if so, what is that?
Yeah, excellent. Well, I'm going to tell you the first thing in the morning, and then I'm going to do a little neuromindfulness.
Okay.
We're going to weave that in, right?
All right.
So first thing in the morning, I hope everybody brushes their teeth, right? So at first thing in the morning, end of the night. So I would invite your listeners to do a habit stack. So you're brushing your teeth, and now every morning when you brush your teeth, you set an intention for the day. So if you're working on a word choice, you might say, I will replace but with N today. And you set that intention or that affirmation, right? So that every day you have a focus that has begun at the very beginning of the day. Then at the end of the day, when you're brushing your teeth, that you're reflecting and you're applauding what you did well. Like when I was saying, think about the number of times that you caught yourself or what have you. So you're having that positive reinforcement of how you're heading in the right direction, right?
Okay.
So then a little neuroscience for you, because you sort of brought this up, is that we have this going 24/7, and to some degree it's negative. So think about that as a spiral. So we have this narrative that spirals downward, and some days it goes really far, like spiral. And that's based on the stories and the narrative and each loop. Let's think of each loop as a story that's going. What you want to do is break that momentum down and start the narrative back up with the different word choices that I'm proposing, and that you change the narrative. Well, the catch is, from a neuroscience standpoint, is that actual break. How does that happen? Because what happens is, as the narrative goes, we automatically go on a pathway that's well worn. I call it the yellow brick road. All those bricks have been laid over time. Other people telling us stuff about ourselves. Third grade teacher said this, all these bricks. So you're spiraling downward, and then next thing you know, you're on the yellow brick road, right? So you need a pivot point. You need a point at which you spiral upward. So the pivot point, Cassandra, that I tell my clients and that I like, because it's tactile, and some people are listening and not watching, but I'm rubbing my index finger with my thumb on each hand. Like that. And to the point where I can feel the ridges on each of the index fingers, on each of the thumbs. I might even feel along in my palm, the ridges and such. And I do that just for a minute. And in that minute, I can take 5-6 breaths, very intentional breaths. And I do that. That's my pivot point. So I'm having the spiral, and I go, I recognize the spiral. Instead of going on the yellow brick road, I do this. And this, my trigger to start the narrative that's positive and takes me upward.
Okay. So you're reframing.
Yes.
Somewhat reframing what it is. Okay. I will definitely try that. And I encourage my audience to try it as well. For those who are unable to see, it's your thumb, right? And your
index finger,
and just rub them when you find yourself mentally spiraling. That way, that'll keep you. That's intentional. It's intentional for you to reframe what you're thinking and start the day. You could do that anytime during the day.
That's right. And it's going to activate. The idea is that you start to program yourself to activate this is not working for me. I'm spiraling downward. Stop. 1 minute. Everybody can find a minute, break it, and then replace the narrative.
Exactly. That minute that you're on social media, you can do that. Yeah, exactly. And I also say, so now my listeners have to brush their teeth twice a day. Okay. So we can start off in the mornings thinking about those great things, what you can do, not what you cannot do. And then at night, you want to reflect on all the great things that you've done throughout the day. which
Mhm.
self-reflect. I think that's great. Now, I want to talk about our title,
Mhm.
the value of prioritizing well-being. I'm also like to know, what are some well-being tactics? Like, what can you do, and why? First of all, why is that a value? Why should we prioritize our well-being?
Yeah, well, nobody's going to prioritize it for us. And so when I speak to my clients and they say, well, I didn't go for a run this week like I intended. And anything, I think the well-being practice is individualized, right? I
Okay.
didn't do yoga as I intended, this and that. And my first question is, well, how did you prioritize it? And they say, well, I thought towards the end of the day I would find time. Wrong answer. That's
Okay.
my wrong answer button. So when you think about your calendar, how we prioritize it is that we do exactly that. Just like it's a priority to meet with my boss, it's a priority to meet with a client and
Yeah.
in my week's time. Where is the priority to meditate? Where is the priority to do some yoga or go for a hike or what have you? Put it on the calendar.
Okay.
So start there. And I propose that you go weeks out before there are more meetings and you slot in and therefore prioritize
Mm-hmm.
what well-being looks like for you, right? So I start every morning with the meditation. It's on the calendar. So if I'm going
Okay.
to live by my calendar, why not put the things that are important to me on there first,
Okay.
right?
And that is if you even have to get up earlier to
Yeah.
accomplish it, right? Okay.
Yes. It says 6 o'clock on my calendar, right?
Okay.
So I do that and I say, okay, calendar that represents all of my other priorities. I'm going to make space for these other things that represent prioritizing my well-being. And as a leader, I'm going to start to normalize that with my team, meaning I'm going to ask, like if you reported to me, I'm going to say, Cassandra, I'd love to know how you prioritized your well-being since we spoke last.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be willing to share with me something that you did that filled you up?
Right.
And then if you tell me only about the weekend things, I'm going to say, well, tell me a little bit about during the week. How do you regain your energy and, feed your spirit and your well-being?
Yeah.
And so when we start talking about it that way, we're going to normalize it. I'm going to share with you, here's what I did. And we're
Okay.
going to start to normalize the prioritizing of the well-being.
Okay. And if we don't prioritize our well-being, what have you seen? Like what happens? Why is that so valuable?
Yep. So we get back to the neuroscience because now we know that having the time and the focus, the inward focus enables us to be more productive and more individually focused on a task like when we're in it, when we're in our whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is that it says on my calendar that I'm going to do right now, my
Mm-hmm.
ability to do that thing is enhanced when I'm coming from a place of well-being. So there's a book that I like to draw attention to called Peak Mind by
Okay.
Dr. Amishi Jha, and
Mhm.
she spent decades studying in the military, first responders, CEOs, all kinds of businesses. And she studied, and narrowed it down to 12 minutes a day of mindfulness, whether that's breathing and sitting quietly or having a guided meditation.
Okay.
12 minutes a day is the sweet spot for being able to be more focused. That's why it's called peak mind, because you'll have your
Okay.
peak mind when you need to be, like as a first responder, let's say, or anything, a CEO making a big decision. That when you start to prioritize that piece of well-being, some
Yeah.
mindfulness, you become more focused, and you're focused at the ready. You're already pre-prepared to be focused when you're able to do that.
Okay. Okay. So, what are some, I guess, some practices? Like, what are some well-being practices? We talked about meditation could be one,
Mhm.
working out, jogging, uh, would like journaling
Yes.
be
Mhm.
one? Any other ones that my listeners could do? And this is in addition to the 12-minute or inclusive of the 12-minute? What do you think?
In addition to, but I'd really focus on the 12 minutes. But, there are other things related to well-being, community, having a sense of community,
Okay.
any kind of movement, and my company, we've distilled it down to 6 pillars of well-being. So self-awareness, presence, community, intuition, movement, and energetic hygiene. So having a
Okay.
sense of paying more attention to your own body is what it boils down to, right? So the things you mentioned, like the running, this and that, those all come under movement for me, and
Okay.
yoga or what have you. I feel strongly that it's individualized, but don't be in your own way by saying, I don't know what I want to do. Start
Mhm.
somewhere and try something, right? And
Right.
then put it on the calendar. So I start with the meditation, but let's talk about how we make this easier. At lunchtime, so I'm a really quick lunch eater. So let's say
Mhm.
I have 10 minutes of eating lunch and I want to get outside and take a walk for 20 minutes. So I habit stack those two things, and I put on my calendar 30 minutes, eat lunch, take the walk, or take the walk, eat the lunch. And now
Okay.
I've habit stacked that. And that feeds my sense of well-being.
Okay. Okay. So, when I think of that, and I want to talk about stress a bit, being overwhelmed. You have this day, you're busy during the day, you miss the brushing teeth part, like the words I'm going to say for the day, and then you like, I got to stack. So what happens when it doesn't get done? Because like for me, I say I'm pretty anal. Like if it's on my calendar and I don't get it done, then I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I feel so overwhelmed because these are the things. How can you get out of that rut and start
Mhm.
over again?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. It's a choice, right? So I
Okay.
think about it when I think about, and I do it too. I have this thing on my calendar that's all about me. And
Yeah.
I forgot to say this, but I color code those things. So I
Huh?
make green the color of all about me. And I make red the must do, what have you. I make
Okay.
orange the preparation for the must do's. And there's an emotional attachment to that. When you look at next week's calendar, and you see red, 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 red,
Right.
then you better darn sight put in some green,
Yeah.
right? So you better
Okay.
put in to balance, you better put in some time for yourself to
Okay.
be able to navigate through.
Yes.
So the point of what you asked is that our natural inclination is to ruminate and to go negative, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so challenging oneself to build in, this is actually how you get out of your way, is
Yes.
to build in those reflection points. So to your point, at the end of the day, when I say, well, I didn't get to that, which felt like a priority for me.
Yeah.
And so therefore, just like a meeting with my boss, I'm going to move it to tomorrow here, or
Oh,
to 2 days from here. And
okay.
I'm going to keep it a priority and put it somewhere else. But I'm not going to beat myself up about it. I'm going to turn inward and say, I didn't do that, but what did I do well?
Okay.
What superseded that is of value to me, and then it'll help me say that was a value. It's okay that I did it, and here's how I'm going to prioritize it going forward.
Yeah. That's
Because
good.
I know it's going to uplift me. The reflection point, Cassandra, the more we reflect and think about it inwardly, the more we build that positive pathway. We're nurturing that, and we're building it, that spiral upward. It's
Right.
growing and growing the more we reflect.
Right, right. And I like the part when you think about, well, what did I do well today? Because, like I said, 80% of our thoughts are always negative. So if we
That's right.
could remember, not if, when we remember that we all do something of value every day,
That's
even
right.
if it's just waking up, you know,
That's right.
right, having your limbs and can move around, to start thinking about that rather than what you didn't do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That was very good. I like to us to talk up to the listeners a little bit. The listeners who are ready to move forward, like want to start their own business, want to be an advocate for something, want a job promotion. Um, stuck in a situation, in a relationship that they know is toxic. It's probably not good for them to be in that type of relationship. Um, what what and so but they get stuck. So
Mhm.
what are some ways you would bring out what I call their potential?
Mhm.
I think everybody has a gift. Everyone has potential. Everyone has talent. I believe that we are here for a reason to do what it is that I say that God has ordained us to do. That gives us a life of fulfillment and meaning. So, what are some ways as a coach that you could talk to the listeners to bring out their potential, because we all have it?
Yes, I totally agree. And that's how we get out of our way, right? So
Yeah.
when I think about that, the number one thing that I probably within the second session of coaching somebody, I listen for the degree to which they're asking what or how questions. So when I say, even when you say the people who are ready, okay, so let's assume there's this person who's ready, any of the readiness that you mentioned, a relationship, a new job, what have you. I'm going to now, in my reflection, I'm going to ask myself what and how questions. That peels back the layers of what's true to me. And then there is my potential right there in the middle, shining brightly. So I'm going to say, wow, what difference will this make for me to take this step forward? How will I benefit? How will my family benefit? Um, how does this align with my values? What additional value will I bring when I take this step? And so I'm going to what, how
Right.
myself until I peel back those layers and I get to the aha that this is, and this is also the support for me taking that step when I answer those what, how questions.
Okay. The what, how, the what, how, the what, how.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Go
And
ahead.
I
Mhm.
was just going to say, and we don't ask why, because why can imply judgment. Why do I want to do this? Or why do I even think I can? Or, what have you. We start to, even if I ask you, why do you believe that? It even inadvertently, I might not be judging the
Right.
belief that you have, but saying it in that manner, as opposed to, tell me what's important to you about this belief, or how is this belief related to a value that you hold, or what have you. That'll help me further understand it way
Mhm.
better than asking you why. So I'm not going to ask myself why. I'm going to ask myself what and how.
Okay. Now, is this different than, when when individuals have these dreams, like, I want to have my own business, or, and it's kind of like you wrote your book and I said, well, why did you write that book? Is that different? And
No,
it's some,
yeah, no, that's it. You're coming from a place of curiosity, not
okay.
judgment, right? So
Okay.
you're being
Okay.
coming from a place of curiosity, right?
Okay.
Um, yeah, but the let's say the career change or owning this business. When I say what what difference will it make in my life, or how can I impact others, and how is this aligned with my values, or who I intend to be, when I start to peel those layers back in that manner, it
Yeah.
gets me fired up and it gets me out of my own way and moving
Okay.
forward. Yep.
Okay. 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 That's good. That's good. Because I was like, oh, I was judging. Like, why did you write that book? Like, why in the world did you write that book? And it's
Yeah,
it's, it's not it's how you say things,
that's
right?
right.
Not what you say. It's how you say things. Wow. I had intended to ask you this before when we were talking about um, your to-do list. You have the red, the green, the yellow, and then you want to make sure you do your thumb and your index fingers to kind of recenter you and get you
Mhm.
back to what your focus was. And I noticed that a lot of people, they have their to-do list and they want to do this, but they multitask. What makes multitasking a myth?
Mm. The neuroscience behind it makes it a myth. so,
Okay.
so I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. So
Okay.
basically, our prefrontal cortex has two sides, and when we are multitasking, we're making those sides compete with each other. So We're
Oh,
this, know this. And so here's the studies that bring it to life. The most recent studies are about distracted driving. And so we're doing this thing, we're driving, and then they're going to answer a text or what have you. So we're asking our brains, this is doing this, and now we want to do this. And the potential for error, for memory issue, for recall, for making the wrong decision, for switching that focus too quickly so that you're not fully paying attention to what you intend to pay attention to. The room for error is huge. So I say that you read one of those studies and you'd be reticent to even change the dial on the radio.
wow.
Which luckily it's up on the steering wheel now, which makes us less distracted. And so what we want to do, and what most people who say that they multitask, because I said that for a long time until I understood it. Yeah. The people who say that, a lot of us were really single tasking, but we were doing it in such a sequence that it seems like that it's multiple things. But instead, we're going to be master single taskers and do this one thing and focus and then move to the next. So sometimes we do them so quickly, it appears as though we're multitasking, but we're actually focusing on the task at hand. So Cassandra, I call it FAST, which stands for focused. So you're going to go like focus, no distractions. Alignment is the A. So I'm going to align with why I'm doing this thing in a nanosecond. What's the value of it? You know, how does it align with my goal? So on and so forth. Align. And then ST is single task. And so I'm going to make the consideration of focus and aligned in a nanosecond, and then I'm going to single task. That's what your brain is capable of.
Right. Even though we think it can do multiple things. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And what I've learned, because I used to say the same thing, I can multitask, I can do this, but I usually don't finish something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just try to focus on that one thing that I'm going to focus on today or for the first hour, whatever. A good example is social media. I'm like, no, I'm not going to look at social media in the morning because I have this to do, because that could take more time out of my schedule, what I put in as my to-do list. So that's something. I have one more question to ask you, because I know that many of us do this, but sometimes it's just overboard. And I'm certain this has to do with the neuroscience. Let's talk about procrastination. Why is that such a big deal? Procrastination is huge.
We all have it, and it really we all have it because of the neuroscience behind it. It's irrational, so it's actually an emotional response. This is what we've learned, is that something else is going on that's gotten me to have some emotional response, whether it's anger or frustration or something. And then the irrational part is, I know that procrastinating, not doing this thing, is going to make me feel worse. Right? And I choose not to do it anyway. Therein lies the irrational part.
Now, I'm sorry, it's going to make you do what now? The procrastination?
It's going to make me feel worse.
Feel worse, right?
Yeah,
okay.
It's going to make me feel worse. And it's I'm going to beat myself up more because I'm not doing this at the time that I allotted to do it, right?
Exactly.
And so that's why it's irrational, because it's an emotional response in the first place. You're saying, okay, I'm feeling so badly, or I am angry about this, or I'm frustrated with my coworker or whatever. And so we turn around and say, I'm going to put this off as a temporary relief,
right?
Because I can control that, and I'm going to put it off.
Yeah.
So that's irrational, because I know that eventually I'm going to beat myself up for not having done this thing.
Yes.
And so that's kind of the neuroscience behind. There's a lot to it, like how one would stop, maybe do the finger and the thumb and say, whoa, hang on. I was about to procrastinate doing that. Okay. Let me center myself and let me get to the root of the emotional response that I'm having and what's causing me to potentially do this. Okay. And then once that break happens and you do the pivot point, then start to think about the spiral upward. things such as the value of doing this. Can I break it down into smaller pieces to gain some momentum? What would a first best step be? So start to, who else might assist me on this? And there actually wrote a chapter in a book that is about sort of how to tease out these different ways to build the narrative out and start going in a positive direction and choose to do this thing instead of procrastinating.
Okay. And one of the things I found myself, if I'm aware that I'm doing it, then I'll stop. Like I'm just procrastinating. All I have to do is go out and walk my dog, and my neighbor will say, there's a sale on such and such and such. And I'm like, oh, okay, I think I'll go do that. And then I'm like, nope, I have something that I had planned to do. So just that awareness, I think is critical. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
And if you haven't gotten it, then that's when you might suspect it. Then do your pivot point, some sort of breathing exercise that helps you go, whoa, hang on. What was really important and why was that important? And then you'll move towards the thing you truly want to do.
Right.
Yeah. I want to tell you, if I may, when you just said about social media, I was laughing to myself because I have this new practice that I'd love to share with your listeners. So my social media, now I say, okay, I can scroll through Instagram while I'm in a wall sit or while I'm doing a plank. And so here's the catch. I can't do any of those things for more than a minute.
Exactly. That's good. Right. So make sure we're doing our planks, make sure we're doing our exercises. And yeah. Well, Terre, you were just great. It's just so much you've brought to the table that you shared with my audience, starting from your childhood. You always, had that leader mentality. Your dad was one to say, hey, you can do anything you want to do, and then how you kind of observed individuals to notice that the words they used were either harmful or non-productive, or you just couldn't get the productivity out of people because it's not what you said, it was how you said it. Even talking about the well-being, how the value of prioritizing our well-being, and then those little, the thumb and the index finger, you rub that to pivot, or to change your thinking, or to reframe your thinking. How can in your coaching as well, and I love the neuroscience, I'm like, wow, maybe I should take a course in that. How can my listeners get in touch with you if they like you for coaching, or either getting your book? Your book sounds phenomenal. How could they get in touch with you?
Oh, I love that. And we have lots of free resources. So the website is thrivingleadercollaborative.com. And actually, Cassandra, just this week, our app has gone live under the same name. Yep. Thriving Leader Collaborative. Yeah. And so you can there's an app for that. So you can get the free resources, and we have video clips, and with the calendar that I talked about, I have that calendar shell that hopefully inspires people to prioritize their well-being.
Okay.
Yeah. Or they can email me. So it's Terre, Terre at thrivinglc.com.
Okay. Now, do you have any last words or key takeaways that you'd like to share with my listeners before we sign off?
I'm going to share my favorite quote. It's the first one in the book. It's by a man named Tom Kenyon. We are creating the world by how we speak to each other. Right? Yes. And I'll highlight that you yourself stopped yourself when you said if, because when you said if, and then you go, oh no, when, because the if was implying doubt or lack of possibility. Maybe, sort of, kind of, we can. Yes. And then you went to when, that was more assertive. And so we're creating the world, our worlds, by how we speak.
Yes. Well, thank you. Yeah. So my listeners, you heard our talk today with Terre Short, and the value of prioritizing well-being. And if you believe that this podcast would be a blessing, please share it. Also, that Is Your Way in Your Way on every Wednesday at 1 p.m. And I want to thank you for listening today. And I will talk to you next week. And God bless, and bye for now.